Chapter 13. Brian stood at the end of the long part of the L of the lake and watched the waters. Smelled the waters, listened to the waters, was the waters. A fish moved and his eyes jerked sideways to see the ripples, but he did not move any other parts of his body and did not raise the boat or reach into his belt pouch for a fish arrow. It was not the right kind of fish, not a food fish. The food fish stayed close in the shallows, and did not roll that way, but made quicker movements. Small movements, food movements. The large fish rolled and stayed deep and could not be taken, but it didn't matter. This day, this morning, he was not looking for fish. Fish was light meat, and he was sick of them. He was looking for one of the foolish birds. He called them fool birds. And there was a flock that lived near the end of the long part of the lake, but sometimes he did not understand. Half stopped him, and he stood, breathing gently through his mouth to keep silent, letting his eyes and ears go and do the work for him. It had happened before this way. Something had come into him from outside to warm him, and he had stopped. Once it had been the bear again. He had been taking the last of the raspberries, and something came inside and stopped him. And when he looked where his ears said to look, there was a female bear with cubs. He had taken two more steps. He would have come between the mother and her cubs, and that was a bad place to be. As it was, the mother had stood and faced him and made a low sound in her throat to threaten and warn him. He paid attention to the feelings now, and he stood and waited patiently, knowing he was right and something would come. Turn, smell, listen, feel, and then a sound, a small sound, and he looked up and away from the lake and saw the wolf. It was halfway up the hill from the lake, standing with its head and shoulders sticking out into a small opening, looking down on him. With wide yellow eyes, he had never seen a wolf, and the size threw him. Not as big as a bear, but somehow seemed that large. The wolf claimed all that was below him as his own, took Brian and his own. Brian looked back and for a moment felt afraid because the wolf was so right. He knew Brian knew him and owned him and chose not to do anything to him. But the fear then, moved away, and then Brian knew the wolf was for what it was. Another part of the woods, another part of all of it. Brian relaxed the tension on the spear of his hand, settled the bow in his other hand from where it had started to come up. He knew the wolf now as the wolf knew him, and he nodded to it, nodded and smiled. The wolf, the wolf watched him for another time, another part of his life. Then it turned and walked effortlessly up the hill, and as it came out of the brush, it was followed by three other wolves, all equal, large and gray and beautiful, all looking down on him as they trotted past and away. And Brian nodded to each of them. He was not the same how the Brian that stood now the Brian that stood and watched the wolves move away and nodded to them was completely changed. Time had come, time that was measured but didn't care about. Time had come into his life and moved out and left him different. and measures times 47 days had passed since the crash. 42 days he thought since he had died and been born as the new Brian. When the plane had come and gone, it had put him down, gutted him, and dropped him and left him with nothing. The rest of that first day, he had gone down and down until dark. He had let the fire go out, had forgotten to eat even an egg, had let his brain take him down to where he was done, where he wanted to be, down, I mean, done, done, done. Oh, done and done. My bad. To where he wanted to die, he had settled into a grave of deeper and still deeper until finally in the dark he had gone up on the ridge and taking the hatchet and tried to end it by cutting himself. Madness is hitting, madness that took his brain there and been nothing for him. Then he tried to become nothing but then cutting had been hard to do, impossible to do. And then he had at least fallen to his side, wishing for death, wishing for an end, and slept, only didn't sleep. With his eyes closed and his mind open, he laid on the rock through the night, laid and hated and wished for it to end, and thought the world cloud down through that awful night. Over and over, the world wanted all his clouds to come down, but in the morning, he was still there on his side, and the sun came up, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the cuts on his arm, the dry blood turning black. He saw the blood and hated on the blood, hated what he had done to himself when he was the old Brian and was weak, and two things came into his mind, two true things. He was not the same. The plane passing and changed him. Disappointment cut him down and made him new. He was not the same and would never be again like he had been. That was one of the true things. And the other one was that he would not die. He would not let death in again. He was new. Of course, he had made a lot of mistakes. He smiled now, walking up to the lake shore after the wolves were gone, thinking of the early mistakes, the mistakes that came before he realized that he had to find new ways to be what he had become. He had made new fire, which he now kept going using practically rotten wood because the punky wood would smolder for many hours and still come back with fire. But that had been an extent, extent of doing things right for a while. His first bow was a disaster that almost blinded him. He had sat a whole night and shaped the limbs carefully until the bow looked beautiful. Then he had spent 2 days making arrows. The shafts were willow straight and with the black peels, and he fired hardened at points and split a couple of them to make forked points. As he had done with the spear, he had no feathers, so he just left them bare. Figuring for fish they only had to travel a few inches. He had no strength, and that threw him until he looked down at his tennis shoes. They had long laces, too long, and that he found that one lace cut in half would take care of both shoes, and that he left the other lace for a bowstring. All seemed to be going well until he tried a test shot. He put an arrow to the string, pulled it back to his cheek, and pointed it at the dirt hummock. And at that precise instant, the bow wood exploded in his hand, sending splinters and chips of wood to his forehead, just above his eye, and they had been only slightly lower if they would have blinded him. They would have blinded him. Two stiff mistakes. In this mental journal, he listed them to tell his father. Listed all the mistakes he had made. A newborn with slender limbs, a more fluid, gentle pull, but he could not hit the fish through though. He sat in the water and was in the end surrounded by a virtual cloud of small fish. It was infuriating. He would pull the bow back, set the arrow just above the water, and when the fish was no more than an inch away, release the arrow. Only two missed. It seemed to him that the arrow had gone right through the fish again and again, but the fish didn't get hurt. Finally, after hours, he stuck the arrow down in the water, pulled the bow, and waited for a fish to come close. And while he was waiting, he noticed that the water seemed to make the arrow bend or break in the middle. Of course, he had forgotten that the water refracts bend light. He had learned that somewhere in some class, maybe it was biology, he couldn't remember, but it did bend light, and that meant the fish were not where they appeared to be. They were lower, just below, which meant he had to aim under them. He would not forget his first hit, not ever. A round-shaped fin with golden slides, slides a gold as the sun, stopped in front of the arrow, and he just aimed with bent with vented it at the bottom edge of the fish and released the arrow, and there was a bright flurry, a splash of gold in the water. He grabbed the arrow and raised it up, and the fish was on the end, wiggling against the blue sky. He held the fish against the sky until it stopped wiggling, held it and looked to the sky, and felt his throat tighten, swell, and was filled with pride of what he had done. He had done food with this bow with the arrow fashioned by his own hands. He had done food. He had found a way to live. The bow had given him this way and exalted it in the bow, in the arrow, in the fish, in the hatchet, in the sky. He stood and walked from the water, still holding the fish and arrow and bow against the sky, seeing them as they fit his arms, as they were part of him, as he had food. He cut a green willow fork and held the fish over the fire until the skin crackled and peeled away, and the meat inside was flaky and moist and tender. This he picked off carefully with his fingers, tasted every piece, mashing them in his mouth with his tongue to get the juices out of them. Half steaming pieces of fish. He could not, he thought, then never, ever, ever get enough. And all that first day, first new day he spent going to the lake, shooting a fish, it back to the fire, taking it back to the fire, cooking it and eating it, then back to the lake, shooting a fish, cooking it and eating it, and on that way until it was dark. He had taken the scraps back to the water, which he thought they might work for bait. And then the other fish came by the hundreds to clean them up. He could take his pick of them, like a store. He thought just like a store, and he could not remember later how just he ate that day, but he thought it would have been over 20. It had been a feast day, his first day and a celebration of being alive. In this new way, he he had of getting food by the end of that day. When it became dark and he lay next to the fire with his stomach full of fish and grease from the meat smeared around his mouth, he could feel new hopes building in him. Not hope that he would be rescued, that was gone, but hope in his knowledge, hope in the fact that he could learn and survive and take care of himself. Through hope he thought that night, I am full of hope. I am full of tough hope.
Composition lagi.